Welcome. Good afternoon, colleagues. I think we're going to get started in a few minutes. I see there's just a few more people waiting to be admitted. So we will be recording the session. I will make notice of that again. But I think, Kagiso, do we wait maybe a minute or two just for other colleagues to join us?
Just wait a few minutes and then we'll get the show started.
So shall we just wait another minute or two?
Yes, please. About 2 to 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So colleagues, what we'll do is we're just going to wait a few minutes more while people are still joining the session, and we'll get started. So yeah, please just bear with us. We are on time, but we just want to give other colleagues a chance to come through and join the session. So we will start promptly in the next 2 to 3 minutes, and we'll get started. So thank you so much for bearing with us. Okay, well, welcome back to those of you that have been waiting. Colleagues, I believe we are now at least 3 minutes in. That would have been ample time for those who were just coming in at a later stage to join us. So I think we are going to get started. I just want to confirm that you can hear me. So can I just get some thumbs up or some raises of hands or something that you can hear me? Okay, beautiful. Then let's get started. A very warm welcome to all our esteemed colleagues, academics, researchers, and colleagues from industry. It's a pleasure to have you all here today. And I think we are honored by your presence and look forward to a productive and engaging event. I think the idea is to, once the presentation is done, to actually have some really intense, not too intense, but beautiful conversations. And for your noting, colleagues, is that the presentation will be recorded, so please take note of that. On behalf of the University of Johannesburg, the College of Business and Economics, the School of Consumer Intelligence and Information Systems, and the Department of Information and Knowledge Management, it is my pleasure to welcome each and every one of you. Today's topic, implementing Heutagogy as a teaching approach in the era of generative artificial intelligence, is quite intriguing, and I think it's so apt that we seek to understand this topic better, especially in the era that we're in. And I'm particularly excited to welcome our speaker, Rafael Ebiafung, whose work in this field it's clearly looking at answering real world questions. Rafael Ebiafung is a PhD researcher and graduate research assistant at the School of Information Science, the University of South Carolina, United States. And before joining the iSchool for his doctoral studies, he worked as a lecturer and pioneer university librarian at Top Faith University, Nigeria. Having served in various university leadership and academic committees, including the governing council and curriculum and research committees, he is committed to fostering discussions on innovative pedagogies and best practices in higher education. He holds a bachelor degree, first class honors, and a master's degree in library and information science from the University of Maiduguri and Ibadan in Nigeria, respectively. His experience working with and teaching undergraduate students informs his current research focus to understand how young people learn, seek, and interact with information amidst the proliferation of generative artificial intelligence, better known as Gen AI technologies. His research contributions have been published locally and internationally in reputable journal outlets. Ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Rafael Ebiafung. Rafael, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that humbling introduction. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon from here. Can you hear me all? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Great. Okay.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. The session is going to be very interesting because it's going to be about what we have heard for some time now, which is very popular, the concept of generative artificial intelligence vis-a-vis teaching and learning. And I'm happy to be part of this wonderful session, and I'm sure we are going to learn so much about it. Now, let's get down to why the objectives of this is very important. Why we have the few sessions we are going to have now that we will explain heutagogy and the principles of heutagogy, and of course, apply heutagogy approach in the context of classroom and learning as students and also as educators and industry participants. These ideas, I believe, is going to be very essential moving forward in our classroom and our other academic engagement. And we are going to also have identify and discuss relevant Gen AI tools for students and educators, because there is so much in conversations surrounding about which of this is relevant, which of these is not relevant, and also why this is also very important. And then let's go to why the webinar, because there are thousands, hundreds or thousands of webinars about generative AI technologies. So while I tell us why this webinar is very essential, I want to tell you what this webinar will not do. And that is to tell you what generative AI means, because that is already in the public domain. So what our webinar is going to do now is to, first of all, highlight the concept of heutagogy. Why is it important now? And also, how would this be very useful in reducing the negative effect of the proliferation of generative AI technologies? Why generative AI technologies are very good, all right? Using them to achieve the aim, especially in education, is as critical as what they stand for. So there have been various concerns about generative AI technologies, how they affect teaching and learning in the world. And the scholars have also talked so much about it. And I have a popular scholar who discussed about it. Salido 2023 argues that the introduction of generative AI technologies into educational environment has remarkably revolutionized the process of teaching, necessitating intentional adoption of effective teaching approaches. Now, this is the center of this course. If generative AI are being used by students and professors are complaining that students are using them to enhance learning, does that affect teaching? Does it affect students too in terms of engaging in academic activities in the classroom? How does this combine affect how people approach learning? Does it also discourage students from coming to the classroom? These are all critical ways that we need to always discuss. And heutagogy is very essential when applying this, because from what heutagogy means as a teaching approach, from what heutagogy means as a teaching method, from what heutagogy means as a learning strategy, it's going to be very essential that we understand the idea and the principles of heutagogy. And as educators, and also as students, as industry participants, we see how to take its principles to apply them either personally in our personal studies time, also and in the classroom. So this is why the webinar contributes in addressing this concern. And just for us to be at pair with the whole discourse, I just want to quickly throw this so that we can have a very conversational webinar and ensure that everybody is carried along. I'm just going to throw this very interesting question. How has AI technologies affected in quote, it can be positive or negative. That's why I had to use that in a parenthesis. How has AI technologies affected you as an educator or a student, whether in the classroom or research, in one way or the other? Is it positive or negative? Just very quick response to that will really help us to know that we are hearing each other. Please, how has AI technologies affected you? If you are an educator, that can simply just respond to that, or a student, whether in the classroom or research. Just a quick way to prompt our mind so that we navigate to where the central discourse of today. Anybody to make that contribution as we move forward?
Rafael, I apologize. I think everyone's mics are muted from our side, so no one's going to be able to just respond to you.
Okay.
Can I ask colleagues that you use the Q&A? Should you have any posts or questions to ask, so we can engage that way? I do apologize, Rafael.
Okay, you can go ahead. You can go ahead. Just
so yeah, please.
I need to prompt our mind. Yeah. So apologies, because I know scholars here would have really want to have a very engaging conversation, but I know as we progress, we'll have to answer some questions, you know. So the concept of heutagogy to some people is very new, all right, because it's not very popular compared to andragogy and other pedagogies that we are so used to. So heutagogy is a very relevant pedagogy now, especially that there is so much conversation about how to keep students engaged in the classroom. How can learning be effective in a time where a student within seconds can access every idea that a lecturer or an instructor is communicating in class? A student can simply get the whole textbook or a whole topics that you have discussed in class throughout the 16 weeks of your class. You can simply get that through using the right prompt. All right, but why are you going to be different? All right, how can students really be interested in coming to your classroom, or how can, or again, students take advantage of all of these teachings? And that's why heutagogy is very important. So heutagogy is a term coined by Hess and Kenyon in the year 2000, and of course, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, my screen just went off. Yeah. So heutagogy is an extension of pedagogy and andragogy, teaching and learning approach. And the essence of this is not to condemn other pedagogies, but it's also is an extension of existing approaches in learning. And the area of generative artificial intelligence have made it very common now in the United States that lecturers are trying to go to it and see how to take full advantage of the possibilities of heutagogy. And then for the purpose of clarifications, what is heutagogy? Heutagogy is defined as the study of self-determined learning, a method of teaching and learning that allows learners to discover for themselves, all right? And it often used synonymously with self-determined learning. And all of this, what makes it unique is its possibilities, its principles. And the central position of heutagogy is that it emphasizes autonomy of learning, capability of the learners, and self-efficacy of the learner. All these constructs mean one thing, how the competence of the learner. And if a learner has to be trained to be capable when it comes to solving his problems, when it comes to contributing to academic discourse, either as a student or after graduation, therefore instructors are expected to intentionally leverage the features of heutagogy by ensuring that that students are autonomous learners within and outside the classroom. That is becoming lifelong learning or becoming lifelong learners, as the case may be. Then they have to be capable in also solving problems through the skills, through their knowledge in the classroom, and through their abilities gained from the classroom. And self-efficacy, again, is ability to also be proficient in also discussing the context of the discussion in the classroom, and without necessarily cramming or quoting verbatim what the lecturer says. The student should be able to have that competence of functioning outside the classroom. And if this is going to happen, we are going to have the heutagogy principles emphasized directly or indirectly in the classroom. Then the central thesis about this, the principles, is that the instructor is to only be the provide the learning map and context without having to spoon feed his or her students, as the case may be. It gives learners, if you are a professor, if you are an instructor, a student, be reassured that heutagogy will give you autonomy to take responsibility for what they need to learn, for what you have to learn as a student or as an instructor, giving students that privilege to be part of what you want to teach them. All right. It emphasizes peer-to-peer learning, engagement, and feedback. This is also the crux of the whole concept of heutagogy, where there has to be flexibility in classroom. Students have to negotiate assessment. All right. Now, why is this important? If students are allowed to be part of what should be taught in class, the basic level of this conversation is about letting students contribute to the content of your classroom. All right. What you're going to teach them, this is how it works. If you have 2 required texts, for instance, all right, out of the 2 required texts, you can allow students, by virtue of them participating in the classroom, to suggest which of the texts will be most preferred to them that is not included in your list of required texts. This is also a strategy for you to make students feel that sense of importance. The reason is that everybody requires validation. So if a student, especially in African context, in Nigeria, where I based before now, that lecturers have a say, or lecturers are the people who decide 100% of what happens in the class in terms of the course content. All right. But times have come for heutagogy principles to really be strictly enforced, so that while you have the knowledge, while you have the competence as an instructor to supervise the classroom, provide what should be taught, give that student or a group of students opportunities to simply suggest what required tests do you know about in this course that should be very relevant. How should the assessment be done? How would you prefer the assessment? I know the tendency for students to simply, highlight the easiest assessment method that will be very effective to them is there. That's why the instructor need to provide context. They say within this, from the list of these questions, for instance, which of these will be most effective to you as a student? Of course, you are always there to always guide, But again, what is very important is that sense of autonomy where students know that they are part of the teaching process. This goes as far as emphasizing the humanizing your classroom. If a student feels in the morning that he or she is coming to class, and because he or she has contributed in the content of the classroom, that sense of ownership, that sense of autonomy, that excitement will be there, especially the categories of students that we have now who are fortunate, I would say, to access devices or softwares in the history of the world where everything can be available within seconds. ChatGPT and the rest, and so many of others that are emerging now, and with the possibility of many of these software being enhanced in the future or updated in the future to become more effective and efficient in meeting the needs of the students. So this is the principles that are very essential now, that nobody can dodge or escape the fact that generative AI technologies will continue to negatively influence education if care is not taken, if certain principles are not taken, if strategic approaches are not adopted by instructors. And we will never want a time where students feel that coming to class is not necessary again. After all, Copilot, after all, Perplexity.ai and all other generative AI technologies can simply do the work without having to necessarily be in the classroom. So this is what instructors, professors across the globe are working to achieve now, to be able to ensure that their classroom remains relevant in the mind and the ambitions of the student. All right. So key question. While Heutagogy emphasizes autonomy of learners, teaching learners, allowing learners to have a self-directed approach to learning, allowing learners to contribute to the contents of the class, at least a certain percentage, 10%, 20%, which is totally at the discretion of the instructor that is involved, all right, or the professor that is involved. Can this approach be applied effectively in the current learning environment where AI reigns supreme? That is also a prompt that I want us to reflect on as we go ahead, in talking about the possibilities of pedagogy in the classroom in a practical terms. Application of pedagogical approaches. Now, how then, which I know that's the question that many of us have in mind now, how can we apply this in the basic terms in the classroom? All right. One is, if you're an instructor, for instance, an educator, or industry participant that is also designing learning strategies in your university, in your educational environment. One is the set clear goals. Now, we cannot weigh the fact that there is controversy about what generative AI should do and to what extent that generative AI should not go in the classroom, which again is a matter of the university policies and also the professor's prerogative. The first thing you should do when trying to adhere to the principles of pedagogy is set clear goals. At the beginning of your class, for instance, tell a student or tell the student that certain types of generative AI will be applied in this course to some extent. Tell your class that generative AI technologies will not be used in this course because of the reason this and that. Please do not make the mistake, because we are predominantly undergraduate students predominantly are Gen Zs, so they are born into this time where technology have so much possibilities. So it's not advisable to stand your ground and say you don't accept this technology. The reason is that when that happens, they will suddenly develop, maybe they will not really like your class. And as educators or as students or as practitioners, you know that if a student does not like your class or your person, it's all already a minus, all right? While you may not be able to control what students think about you, but it's also imperative that you also guide against what will make students to be unnecessarily antithetical to your teaching approach, which is not good for anybody who wants to impart knowledge to students. So setting clear goals, tell them what happens, what you are going to tolerate, what is acceptable, what will not be acceptable, what are AI technology, some topics that AI technology will be applied for the purpose of knowledge, not for the purpose of being spoon-fed. So this critical approach is very essential because of that need for students to feel that sense, that respect, that sense of belonging by virtue of being part of your class. And why that happens, why the learning continues, there is something you must do now is create a reflective journal. Now you have to encourage students to create a reflective journal. For instance, if you have 16 weeks of your classes, each of those weeks, each of them, there must be a reflective journal that will be discussed by the students at the end of your class, maybe in your revision week or week to your revision. This is a strategy to ensure that every student has a note or a journal that he or she develop by virtue of participating in your class every week of your classroom. In a case that the student took permission and was not able to attend the classroom, that is not an excuse. The student have to meet his or her peer and then have a discussion about what was discussed in the class. All right. This is an intentional approach to ensure that they have every idea that you have shared in the classroom or what you have taught in the classroom for the first, second to 16 weeks, depending on how many weeks the university allow. This is also a critical strategy that you must. The essence of this is your responsibility as an educator to ensure that compel, in quote, that students gain the knowledge they need to get, whether they can access all of these in ChatGPT era or whether they can access all of these using Copilot, these don't matter. If a student is allowed to create a reflective journal that intentionally captures your ideas, it must not be completely. Note that this reflective journal there must be a structure. You don't just have reflective journal without any tag. As to me, maximum can be a page, so that it cannot be very stressful, but the whole content with the right rubric ensure that every of that week there has been a reflective journal that student will refer to at the end of your class, at the end of the teaching session within the semester. This can be also revised or discussed at the end or a week before the revision week or at the revision week. This is very critical. And if you can apply this, I believe the learning you are trying to impart on the student will be very visible. All right. Then use reflective questions. And now there is why this emphasis is critical now using reflective questions is that I teach here too as part-time. So what happens is that those students that you're teaching now, what they do now is to fiddle with their phone. And I don't know what happened in the University of Johannesburg, but I know that in all universities in the world, you definitely be helpless. All right. Whether universities have a policy to guide that, but whereas we rely on universities' policies to guide that, but what you do as an instructor is to be in charge of your class. If you are using reflective questions, it means that, like I did now, every topic there should be a pause where we have engagement in the classroom. There should be a pause, intermediate at least, most times to be able to ensure that students have contributions to what is going on in the class, the ideas that they can have to contribute, and ensure that this is very important and again, very welcoming, not opportunity to victimize students, and also ensure that you create a supportive environment. A supportive environment will enhance or will allow you to achieve the purpose of using a reflective question, because students will be eager to make their contributions without being laughed at. And please, at the beginning of your class, ensure that give that admonition that every idea in this class is very essential for the purpose of learning. So contribute effectively and also ensure that you respect the rights of other students. And also encourage peer feedback. It is a major component of Heutagogy that is very essential, that in the course of this webinar and conversation, we are going to see how peer feedback will keep students on their toes to be able to respond, I would say, to respond to treatment, all right? If you are teaching them, peer feedback will really abdicate that responsibility of judging the students and then giving that to their peers. And that will always spark up a healthy rivalry among the students. So these approaches, from setting of goals down to ensuring that you encourage peer feedback, these are important ways to ensure that students are involved in the class conversation, in the class learning. And please note that this is very effective. And as a lecturer, you can always divide me to ensure that you modernize this. You can add through learning about Heutagogy. But please note that students have to achieve their primary aim, and the primary aim is to learn. And the instructors too must achieve their primary responsibility for them to stay relevant now, and that is to ensure that learning is imparted. And these are strategies that students will always be grateful for if they are done effectively by the instructor, please. So from all of these components, will now let us apply what I would say assessment in Heutagogy. If all this while we used to have assessment, different approaches from take-home assignment to class assignment to test scores, depending on what the lecturer decides to format I want to adopt. But Heutagogy has brought so much light in terms of how assessment should be done. And at the same, if this happens, I tell you that it's going to be very effective. Effective learning is going to be very effective. Now, I want to give an example what I've talked in the last few minutes about Heutagogy when it comes to assessing students. Take question 1, for instance, question of lecturer A. A lecturer A has assignment to give students in this era where only one prompt can provide all answers, all right, without any waste of time. Now we have a lecturer A who goes to the class and then give an assignment. And the assignment reads, question 1, A, define business intelligence. State the advantages of business intelligence and discuss the importance of business intelligence. Before now, where at a time that generative AI was not here, this question may really make sense, all right? May not really can't be a challenge to students in terms of providing answers to them. But in seconds, I tell you the lecturer A will have this question asked, and in seconds too, lecturer A, students of lecturer A will also provide answers to this just at the blink of an eye. So that also is a question that we are going to ask. Will this kind of assessment be effective? That is left to our discretion. Now, questions of lecturer B, which is almost the same question, all right, depending on how it is asked. A, how can business intelligence help you thrive as a new graduate of business analytics, all right, or business intelligence? This is also a critical question, but the student will pause first to ask this question to know how to apply this in the context, or if he graduates, or if or she graduates, how does this, you'll be able to see how to think about this question. In the case that ChatGPT or Copilot also help him or her solve this question, let's get down to B and see the extent to which they will survive this. With appropriate citation, that is also another question already. With appropriate citation, discuss the importance of business intelligence to an audience who do not have a basic knowledge of business intelligence. This is also another important question that a student, even if he or she wants to use a prompt, you hold on a bit and ensure that citations are correct. All right. You also ensure that the audience, what audience he has that mandate of deciding the audience. All right. And also, while you decide the audience, you have to also think of the basic knowledge of business intelligence, how to be able to go take it step-by-step approach on how to ensure that your knowledge is imparted to the right audience. This is the responsibility you have given to your students, and they cannot escape it. Let's say they escape it because they also have a way to also navigate these processes. Let's go down to the last question. You know, there is a step-by-step way of getting them involved. The last question here in the context of our discussion is, be prepared to share your thoughts. And that is the number one prompt, the number one question that is going to bring them to be involved. That's why I highlighted them in red to emphasize the point. Then answer questions in class from your peers. Let me read that again. Be prepared to share your thoughts and answer questions in class from your peers on the sources you consulted for the assignments or for the test. All right. So if this happens, first of all, 3 things that you have done there Prepare to share your thoughts. That's one. Answer question in class from your peers. That is two. Compulsory that their peers, no matter what they must. They cannot just see all their peers and negotiate the question that should be asked. No. At least many peers want to raise question. Why you are going to serve as a moderator to ensure the right questions are asked and ensure that the learning session is truly academic and not for jokes. This learning can be enforced. And then on the sources, note that you don't just ask questions. The peers will not just ask questions because of the topic. They'll ask questions based on the sources that have been consulted. So you have also mandated his peers or her peers to also read the sources that were consulted. At least one, encourage them to share the sources consulted, maybe few hours or a few days before the classroom. And you can also, please note that it must not, if they are sharing 10 sources, have a rubric that it shouldn't exceed 3 sources or minimum of 1 source, that kind of. And note that all of these strategies are Heutagogy approach to ensure that students participate in the learning process. Students have that autonomy to decide how these things should flow. All right. It is a responsibility, please, that we cannot joke with. If not that I might have admitted, I will simply ask between question A from the lecturer A and questions from lecturer B. All right. Which of them, just based on your discretion, I don't want to be the judge of that, do you think will enforce learning in the classroom? That is left for discussion. But to me, in my opinion, I think question B will really compel students to think. Because studies have shown that generative AI overuse of these technologies is negatively affecting critical thinking. While empirical studies have shown that the onus is on us professors, the onus is on us instructors to see how students can be able to be effective. Now, there's a popular idiomatic expression that is it a proverb that when a bird learns to fly without perching, the hunter will also learn how to shoot without missing. So this is a critical way to ensure that there are many ways, but I believe that Heutagogy approach, once you get to class or once you are preparing your curriculum or preparing your instruction, something comes to mind. How can learning really be enforced in a time where a student just one prompt can bring about different information and different ideas, different contexts in the classroom? Please, this is a call for us to make the learning process useful. While we are going to expect comments at the end of this, what are the strengths of this approach? Because no matter how good an approach is, there must be strength and weakness of an approach. And again, the ultimate aim of this is to ensure that an instructor or a student who is involved become part of this and sieving out what is good and then also trying to expunge that which is not very effective. Strength, it can build confidence in the learner when done properly. All right. A learner can know that every student, everybody, including professors, needs validation. So if a student is aware, if a professor is aware that students are contributing effectively based on this approach, you have also played a role in validating students who will leave your class feeling empowered, all right, without necessarily cramming from word to word of what you thought. That can be internalized within them because you have given the opportunity to learn, practice, and also being conscious of the fact that they will be judged by their peers, and also encourage their peers not to accommodate different views without laughing or trying to mock or somebody who made contributions that they feel is not correct, because a learning environment will always welcome different ideas. Then it's essential for developing lifelong learning. A student will always remember what the lecturer did for her, or a student will always remember what he learned from the classroom by virtue of from the set goals and down to the journals that were written and presented at the end of the class. Then build friendships. There will always be, because students will be intentionally collaborate in terms of collaborative skills. It's natural for a student to simply meet the class, his friend, because he was not in class, and be able to build on what was taught in class when the person was not in class. So this also can enhance collaborative skills when done with respect. All right. Then the weakness of this approach, because no matter how perfect Heutagogy is, there must be a kind of weakness. But when moderated, it becomes effective. Learners' individual learning differences may limit effectiveness. There are people who have different, maybe I would say, people who are differently able, all right, who are not very effective when it comes to learning very fast, who are not very effective when it comes to communicating in class, all right. But again, having this weakness in mind, if you moderate it in terms of the autonomy you give to students, it can really be very effective. And then again, the autonomy may be abused. We know that. So that's where the instructor has to be there to guide the students with respect. And of course, students will definitely respond because they're humans who are looking for a way to learn. So if we do that with kind of elements of respect and considering the individual weaknesses, it's not when a student cannot answer a question, you don't wait and stand until he answers. You can simply ask somebody to help, but ensure that nobody feels foolish in the end of the approach you have. So this conclusion will not really be without me highlighting different AI tools, especially for educators and students who are here to be conscious of the fact that when we say generative AI, when we say different AI tools, there are different ways to leverage them without abusing them. And each of the AI tools are not very different, but are unique in terms of their possibilities and functionalities. All right. Let's take, for instance, the consensus.ai. Consensus.ai is not generative AI, but a search engine tool that once you have an idea, all you need to do is type it. Just if you want to search it now, for the sake of time, would have really practiced that, but just search consensus.ai. But once you click on it, write any prompt that you're interested in. It's not going to generate for you, but it's going to highlight, it's going to bring out all published peer-reviewed articles on that. It's going to highlight all the abstract. So it's left for you to have the discretion of reading the abstract and deciding which of these articles you need to download. This is the possibility that AI have also done. All right. So that means in this context, AI is not bad. Generative AI is not bad. It enhances learning instead of limiting learning. So it's not something that a professor will simply get to class and then simply ban it in class. I think except you have express reason for that or a cogent reason for that, I think this should be accommodated. You don't fight it because while you stop students in the classroom, you cannot stop students in the comfort of their homes. You cannot seize their phones, and that is why this is very critical. Then we also have the perplexity.ai, which also have the different functionalities, especially what is very sweet about perplexity is that it also have suggesting prompts that will correct the prompt that you have used to search an idea. There are different ways perplexity or AI will highlight different all of this and also have endnotes through which you can simply click and then download the ideas that has been generated. You can generate the full text to be able to read and decide if it's useful or not. So relying on what it generates ultimately is not advisable, especially for students or educators who want to learn. But for educators who don't want to learn or students who want to learn, you can simply use that. But for the purpose of learning, ensure that you follow those links and download the articles that you feel are available. Then paperpower.ai. Now, paperpower.ai also have interesting functionalities. All right. What I want to highlight here is that I've used Grammarly as AI editing tool, but I think paperpower to me is super. All right. It is strictly designed for academics. You'll be surprised that you have a one-page academic writing. If you use Paper AI, if you install that in your Microsoft add-on and then let it edit your work for you, highlight your sentences for you, don't be surprised that every sentence can be checked, highlighted in such a way that you'll be surprised that you wrote this and paper power was able to detect all your mistakes. Don't be surprised that almost all your sentences can be checked because they may be faulty. I've used different editing tools, but I think paper power to me is superb, and I think it's something that should be considered. And you're going to highlight what's wrong, suggest for you, left for you to accept or reject. All right. So these are also very critical. We have also Gemini with different features. Gemini AI can also accept, and Notebook LM can also allow you to upload your articles and then create podcast. Notebook LM has a feature where you create podcast of what you want to teach in class. If you don't want students to read too much, create a podcast and then project it for students to simply listen to the podcast in the classroom. This critical is also critical, but note that whatever you upload on generative AI may not be yours forever. Please let me take that again. I'm saying may is not sacrosanct, but I know that if you upload something on generative AI, that becomes part of the brain of the generative tool that you have used. What that means is that the idea can be generated in part or a whole somewhere in the world. All right. This is very critical for you to say. Well, once why that may be debatable. Take for example your brain, whatever you have read, whatever becomes your tone as a professor, whatever becomes your tone as a student, the likelihood that you are going to always repeat some words, some ideas in your subsequent academic writing. If professors can attest to this, what I'm talking about. So please, that's how generative AI works. Why I'm not against you uploading your document, but note that especially professors who want to publish, know what you upload directly into generative AI tools like ChatGPT and all other, because while you are going to update that for letting it to correct or better improve your writing, note that that has become part of the brain or the deep learning approach of AI tool, which may likely be generated somewhere else. So please take cognizance of that. And then Research Rabbit also has a feature where you download all your articles and store them according to the headings, according to your subject area. And this is also very critical for students, for educators, for industrial participants who want to develop curriculum. Note that this is very essential. There are different AI tools. I'm not saying this is the end of all of it, but we have a lot of them. As I speak to you today, there may be others in terms of updating features and also brand new emerging ones. But it is left for us to take advantage of this without being lost by it. All right, without being destroyed by it, which is very important. Then we also have insightful.ai. We also have Elicit. Elicit.ai also have a feature that I like it very much. If you have an idea or if you are researching on a topic as a professor that you want to check if this has been done before in that area, or if your research questions similar or the same research questions have been answered before, get Elicit. Even the free version, please, if you must not pay for it. At least the free version will simply type in your idea or your research questions and then ask it, has this topic been done before? What has been done in this topic in terms of answering research questions? You'll be surprised. It's going to highlight or bring out all the articles that have been written, academic articles that have been written in that is available on the internet. So this is also, I think it's going to be very effective for students and also instructors who want to do research. So please note that. Then we also have copilot.ai, which I think we are very common with. This one is very common because of Microsoft. Yes, so you can simply have this while you are reading your academic articles. If you have Copilot installed, what you need to do is simply type in a summary of all what you want to read, and this Copilot is going to highlight that for you. This is critical because it will save your time depending on what you want to learn. All right. In a case that an academic want to write article and you don't have time, highlight this and be ensure that you learn all the major points of the article you want to read. It's also a more elaborate form of abstract. And that is what I know Copilot is very effective. There are different features. I may mention one of them, but I know all of you, when you effectively explore them, indeed, the features are mind-blowing. We also have Cloud.ai. We also have ChatGPT, which is very common. We also have the DeepSeek. So all of these are very essential. And I know that if you take advantage of them, I'm very sure that you're going to be very useful to both your students and you as educator. Then I want to have a very interesting conclusion that will remind us that Heutagogy is an extension of other approaches and not a replacement. All right. Decide what makes class very effective, but do not forget that the learning must take place. Whatever you do that learning does not take place, but once your classes are not humanized, everything is robotic, the question you ask for yourself is, what makes your class different? Either as a student or as an educator. What makes your class different from ChatGPT? What makes your class different from any form of generative AI? What makes your class different from robot? Different activities that will force students to learn in quote, force, in quote, is not a negative connotation of force now, is what you must ensure. So please, the Heutagogy is a replacement. Harmonize your teaching approach and complement other learning approach, but ensure that you use different methodologies highlighted, especially in terms of those approaches highlighted, to make your learning be more human than chatbots. All right. Educator must also take into consideration the context and the expected learning outcomes. Like I said before now, it depends on what you want to learn. Somebody that is teaching mathematics, for instance, will have a different approach to ensure that learning takes place. But again, just know that even mathematics, that all these components are unique. I tried before now to apply to check mean, standard deviation, and median of about a set of 10 numbers, recently trying to test the functionality of ChatGPT. So I used ChatGPT, also used Copilot. I think the mean of those numbers were different in either of the two. That should be Copilot or ChatGPT. The mean was different from what the mean I got from ChatGPT. Yeah, the mean of Copilot was different from what I got from ChatGPT. So it's a testament to the fact that being able to combine different approaches, being able to also test this, using your prompt to test these devices, technologies, is also good for you to appropriately guide or advise your students. All right, it's going to be you are going to be very exceptional when you are able to apply this. The truth is that far from what people are saying that ChatGPT or generative AI will replace teaching, will replace professors. That's not true. It is only professors who are not able to leverage this, complement this with your humanity. That's where the problem is. Technologies have always come. Wikipedia came, and it was people were talking about it. But again, whereas education is still very essential. But let students remember your class, or let students remember you for one thing, and that is going to be a very essential. And that's what professors or instructors, educators aspire to achieve. Teaching should be done with the possibilities of different AI tools in mind. Like I said, if you have what the possibilities of AI in each of your topic, that will also influence how you assess the students. But I want to say that what is very emphasized now, even in the United States here, is the need for peer feedback. The need for more presentations than ever.
I do apologize. I need to just tie up for a bit of time because we do want to get to some questions. So if you can, I'm going to give you just the last comment so that we can get to some of the questions. I'm sure colleagues are eager to engage with you and just have your input on things. So, well, you at the reference list right at the end. So
yes,
I think, okay, just the last comment from you, and then we'll head into the questions.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you very much, my friends, colleagues, and professors who are more advanced, who are more exposed to different what it means to teach in the classroom. And for students, please let us take advantage of different learning approaches once it is presented for us in the classroom and outside the classroom, because at the end of the day, learning must take place. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rafael. Once again, colleagues, well, let me just say that was very, very interesting and intriguing. By no means, there's so many things that you mentioned that was so interesting and exciting there. But I think I'm going to go straight into the questions. Colleagues, please, you're welcome to post questions in the Q&A. I do see we have a question by Wandile. Wandile asks the following question. And colleagues, just to take note that should you have a question, you can raise your hand and we will open up the mics for you to speak to Rafael. But I'm just going to pose this question to you now, Rafael. And this is from Wendile. He says, can personal knowledge management be considered as a practical, individual level instance or direct lineage of a heutagogical approach to lifelong learning?
Please ask the question again, please.
It goes on. Sorry, it says, can personal knowledge management be considered as a practical individual level instance or direct lineage of a heutagogical approach to lifelong learning? Given Heutagogy's principles of autonomy, self-determined learning, and capability development, which I believe coherently align with the objectives of personal knowledge management.
Yeah. Now, the most exciting, thank you very much for that wonderful question. Now, personal knowledge management anywhere you are going to look at it, is very essential part of succeeding in the learning process. So taking into cognizance of managing the knowledge of those who become part of your classroom, also ensuring that you take into cognizance of what they have in terms of their content. It is very critical for you to ensure that you tilt your learning approaches, you tilt your learning methodologies, you tilt the principles of Heutagogy you are adopting in the classroom to adhere to the principles of personal knowledge management. Because when one learning respects or also acknowledges the fact that knowledge that a person comes to the class with is not very completely different from what you are going to provide, it is essential for a professor, an instructor to take into cognizance the aspect of personal knowledge management, because with this, you should be able to liberate from what whoever comes into classroom with a kind of level of knowledge to be able to also contribute effectively, either based on previous knowledge or based on the knowledge that is acquired in the classroom. So all of this, managing people's knowledge base can be an advantage when doing your strategic way of implementing Heutagogy in the classroom. I hope I've answered the question, please.
Thank you, Rafael. Colleagues, is there anybody else who has a question to pose to Rafael? I'm just seeing if there's any hands that are going up.
Yeah, we'll follow up from Wandile in the Q&A.
I think it's the same question. Oh no, it's just, is it a comment? Wandile continues to ask, and considering this alignment, how would the utilization of heutagogical approach in the design and methodology of personal knowledge management research enhance its effectiveness in producing deeper insights into individual knowledge creation and the practical application of knowledge management compared to more traditional research methods? Sure, that's a mouthful there, Rafael.
Okay, I'm seeing the question.
I wonder if you can, if you can just get into the Q&A, you can actually answer it directly there.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at that.
I think while you reading through
I'm
that,
not seeing the question.
Okay, I think maybe if we can, Wanile, we'll also get to the question in a bit, but I also had a very interesting comment that came up was the negatively, how AI is negatively affecting critical thinking. That was something that you mentioned. And so here's the question that came out was, in terms of the heutagogy, how does the student's attitude, so when we spoke about negatively affecting critical thinking, how does the student's attitude contribute or impact the proficiency of learning? Because as much as staff or anyone uses this technology, even in corporate space, how does people's attitudes to using it impact the proficiency of learning? So we have no control over that. We have no control over the student's attitude, but how does that affect the proficiency of learning?
Yeah. Now, as long as attitude is concerned, it's relative. Now, what happens is that if someone or a student or educator rely, I would say absolutely or overuse these technological tools as the ultimate source of information rather than having it as a complementary source of information, it becomes a problem. Once there are certain ideas, let me just give an example. If I have a topic in mind, it is important that I use ChatGPT, for instance, to simply highlight different headings of what the topic should be talking about. But it also behooves you have that responsibility of getting academic peer review journals to populate those headings that you have used ChatGPT to generate. That is a strategic way to also enhance your learning without abdicating the responsibility of thinking or providing answers to the question. Why ChatGPT is good in having a prompt or the scheme or the topics or subheadings of what your topic is all about is the responsibility of you as a person to read journals, read journal articles, engage in conversation to be able to populate and ensure that the contents of those headings that you use ChatGPT to achieve are yours. All right. If that happens, then you can really guide your critical thinking skill. And this is very important. It's not a question of people running away from it. People who rely more on this without trying to possible to make a contributory effort when it comes to providing the contents or what they call their own, they will definitely their thinking capacity will scientifically proven, even just like exercise. If you continue pounding your body for some time, where you pound your body becomes stronger. If you don't pound your body for some time, like in terms of lifting weight, it weakens your body, physical body expression, and that is also in terms of intellectual capacity. When once you don't use your brain for a long period of time because you have seen a easier way to navigate the process, it becomes a problem for you to think critically. At least it will reduce to some extent. It may not completely shut it down, but I'm telling you, it's going to affect negative. So it's better, your attitude should be positive, using it as a complementary source, not as the ultimate source. All right.
Thank you, Rafael. Rafael, I'm going to take one last question that I see posted here. We're already out of time, but I'm going to pose this question and close with this. So the question is from Latif, and the question is the following: what are the ethical implications of using generative AI in universities today? So leaning towards the ethical implications of the use of generative AI in universities.
Thank you very much, Latif, for that wonderful question. Now, in terms of ethics, ethics about what is right and what is wrong, and of course, how does that affect the content that you create, and then also in terms of plagiarism. Now, the most important and of course the most relevant is about copyright use and plagiarism. You cannot, ChatGPT is not an author, all right? There's even publishing house that say that you cannot cite generative AI to say that is your work. So you must take responsibility. So if you have a content that is generated from ChatGPT, and as a professor, and you say that belongs to you, and you put it in your academic article, when it's time for review and you are caught, you are going to go for it as a university instructor. It also applies to students. If a student brings ChatGPT content and presents it as an assignment that he or she did, whereas that was done with just one prompt from generative AI technology, it becomes a problem. So universities' implications have to guide against plagiarism, copyright, and also the intellectual property laws. And if this happens, there has to be policy. The university has to come up with a strong policy that will guide students to use this responsibly. Because I used to tell people, it is not easy to be responsible. In fact, nobody becomes responsible when there is no need. All right, you become responsible because there's a need to be responsible. So if the university gives professors, students the need to be responsible in terms of the use of AI by bringing stringent policies to guide against a committee to really check this. Normally, in the case of overuse of these technologies, I think the issue of ethical implication will strictly be adhered to in the university level. Yeah, I hope that answered the question by Latif.
I think it does. It was very clear.
Yeah.
Rafael, I just want to say thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. Thank you for engaging us at such a level where we are all battling, not battling, but we are all struggling a little bit to get our minds around this concept and how it fits into the university environment. I can only imagine how we making sure that it works in the corporate space. So it's good that we're having these discussions and that we are talking about it. Colleagues, on that note, if you do need to connect with Rafael, please just reach out to Mr. Mabe and we can provide you with Rafael's email address just to continue the conversation. I'm sure there's a lot of questions that are out there. I see that there are some questions that have come in, but we're not going to get a chance to discuss it right now. But on that note, I think our time has expired. And so I want to say thank you to everyone who has taken the time to be here and just share with us right now. I see Rafael has put his email address in the chat section. So please, if you are trying to get hold of Rafael, please just reach out to him. And to you, Rafael, thank you so much. To the organizing committee as well, thank you so much for arranging this. And we look forward to future discussions on this topic and on, in the future what's going to happen. So I look forward to seeing what's going to be the new developments, Rafael, in future with this, and everything of the best with your PhD. So once again, thank you all. Thank you, colleagues, for joining us, and thank you for a successful event. We appreciate it. Please enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
colleagues. Thank you so much,
you.
Rafael. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.